All right, hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Phil, and I'm the host of the No Guts No Galaxy podcast, bringing you, well, an AMA of sorts, a town hall meeting with Russ Bullock, the president of Piranha Games. I've also got Darren here. Now, to preface this, before we go any further, I just want to say, of course, that this highlight is going to be saved on Twitch. It's also going to be uploaded to YouTube, so if you don't miss, or if you don't catch it right now, don't worry. You better watch it later as well as a podcast. And of course, I just want to preface this with saying we don't put up with racism or bigotry or personal attacks against NGNG and or PGI staff. So again, keep it civil. If you have a question, please ask it. And if you're not an ass, we'll answer it. I think that's a pretty legitimate, thing here. So anyways, some introductions really quickly. Russ, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey guys, to be here. Excited. Been wanting to do something like this for a long time.
All right, so we're going to be going for like at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, guys. So you got plenty of questions, and we've already got the list filling up here. And of course, also joining me is Darren, aka Bombadil. What's going on, man?
Hello, and good evening, everyone.
All right, Russ, lots of things to discuss here and talk about. Obviously, we got a whole slew of stuff like, impact of the new project on MWO, lifespan, production of MWO, stuff like that. And we're literally going to be taking questions from the audience right now and tossing them your way. So, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right,
Let's get this party started.
So for the first one, we have Zoef asks, Russ, I wasn't here from the beginning. Am I correct in assuming that IGP and PGI were separate companies only to prevent one office dragging down other stuff with it if it goes down?
All right, thank you for your question. Very simply put, no, you're not correct. That's not a terrible tactic for businesses to use, I suppose. And even at Piranha Games, way back in the history, we did some stuff like that when we did let's say we had a different initiative to make some, more casual Nintendo Wii games or something like that. But that was quite a few years ago, and certainly over the last 3 years, when we've been working on MechWarrior Online, it's been just about MechWarrior and just about Piranha Games only. Piranha Games has been focused on this product entirely, and we have no relationship with IGP. Other than the relationship that they were publishing MechWarrior Online. So I'll tell you a little bit about that because I know this question is going to come up in a few different forms. But if we cover it off now, then maybe that'll take care of it. The story goes something like this. So we are at that point about a 12-year company in town here. Did a lot of work for hire and all those other projects in the past. We'd been trying to get something going with MechWarrior for a while. And then when this, free-to-play game opportunity turned up, there was someone we knew in town. His name was Anthony. He had a company called 7 Group Entertainment locally in Vancouver for quite a while as well. They were like a 10-plus year company that, they did set up infrastructure. So, data center type stuff and lots of PCs. And he always had a big interest in kind of getting more into games. And he was able to secure the funding from the Quebec group in the fall of 2011. So he's doing this all on his own, and we're sitting at Piranha just, supplying some information to him and kind of negotiating, what this deal would look like if they were to get the funding together. So they got their funding together. We were able to put a contract together that said, okay, Piranha Games is the license holder. They have creative control over the product, and we're the developer, and they in turn would be the publisher, and they would be in charge of marketing and customer support, QA, and also the hosting of the product. So we established that relationship then. We had no ownership stake in IGP, and they had none in Piranha. There was no exchange of shares. We didn't sit on the board of directors. They didn't sit on ours. It really was a purely developer-publisher relationship. And that was the start of it. So we took on those separate responsibilities and began development of MechWarrior Online really in fall of 2011. So there really is no other catches. We had no ties to each other than the contractual responsibilities we put between ourselves for how we divided up Macro Online responsibilities, Macro Online revenues, um, etc. Does that fulfill the question, or was there a second part to it?
I mean, obviously, this is all sort of ties into the same category, which is, is IGP and PGI the same company? That was actually another question by Jojo. And this is all sort of one big discussion topic is obviously PGI and IGP's relationship. A lot of people have said, oh, well, you guys are the same company. And, is that the case?
Yeah, well, I think I answered that. Certainly not the same company. I know that people have put together the whole, hey, IGP is PGI backwards. And that was funny because I think the whole time we are putting the deal together, we had no idea that that was the case, that that was turning out to be that way. It wasn't until someone else in the community said, hey, did you know this? They must be the same people. And we thought, oh, geez, isn't that interesting? IGP is PGI backwards. Certainly wasn't planned. Anthony decided to call his company Infinite Game Publishing, and he just told us about that. We didn't have any say in what he named his company. A lot of people have been kind of asking about MechWarrior Tactics. So I'll tell you exactly what our involvement in MechWarrior Tactics is. From the get-go, as the license holder to MechWarrior, the deal that Anthony wanted and Seven Group, and which became Infinite Game Publishing, what they wanted from us was to be able to publish MechWarrior Online, but they also wanted to license the rights from us to be able to develop and publish a turn-based game called MechWarrior Tactics. So our involvement in MechWarrior Tactics was always extremely hands-off. We were basically in line for a royalty rate if the game made money, and which in turn, of course, the royalties flow back to Microsoft, most of them. And then we also had some approval rights, but those approval rights around open betas and launches and various things essentially we never got to that point. So Brian and I and Piranha Games really never got to a point where we sort of judged it or applied some type of approval on the product. We were just kind of waiting for them to get to that point, and we would. So ultimately, we've had no nothing to do with MechWarrior Tactics since the beginning, and right now we continue to have nothing to do with it. Our deal in getting the publishing rights returned to us was specifically for MechWarrior Online, so they still retained their existing rights that they've always had with MechWarrior Tactics, and right now I really can't comment on what their plans are for the product, and that's just all I have. I don't have any more information than that, but no, Piranha is not in charge or doesn't have anything to do with MechWarrior Tactics.
Okay, that answers that. Let's go move on to the next question. This is by BlazeOn420. What a name. Why would I want to crowdfund the new game?
Well, I mean, I think that question is maybe a little premature at this point. When we're talking here about particularly more about how the new project, and we're going to get into this here, how it might impact MechWarrior Online development. I think we can talk about that for a while first. Why? How does the new project affect MechWarrior Online if it does? Your desire to actually get involved in the new game and crowdfund it or spend any money on it, of course, is going to be completely up to you, and whether or not you like what you hear about the new game, if you think it sounds interesting and exciting, and if you feel like Piranha Games can deliver that experience to you. Everyone can have their own opinion there. You're your own customers. But yeah, I think it's a little premature. I think you're obviously going to want to hear what exactly Project 2 is. I mean, I'll just say that I think it's really cool. It's something that we've been passionate about for a really long time. I'm going to stay focused on MechWarrior. Brian's going to be focused on the second project. And I just encourage everyone to, stay tuned, listen, learn, read up about the new project, and you'll decide if that project is something that you want to participate in or not.
All right, excellent. I think continuing on the topic of the new project, Werewolf 486 asks, how much MWO money went towards development of the new project, and when did you start development?
Well, there's been no MechWarrior Online money that went towards the new game's development. The new game's development started just at the very first of the new year. So it has been, I guess, officially in development for about 9 months. However, that's been a fairly light 9 months because that basically starts in January with really no staff at that point. And the staffing starts at that point and starts to grow and takes, a couple months to get up to a dozen or so people. And even to date isn't a lot bigger than that. It's I don't know the exact size. I think it's in the 12 to 15 range. It's a small team that basically is full more of artists and designers, creative people. There's not a lot of engineering yet. There's been a little bit, of course, a little bit of setup, enough for account creation and registration, and a lot of research and development when it comes to the technology in the game and figuring that out. But primarily, it's been creative people. There's an entirely new design team that works with Brian and the artists that work with the new art director. And so, they have I guess the point that is important for this conversation is they have their own new art director and their own new lead designer and their own lead artist, and all those key aspects were hired and brought on. But the team still remains small. It's been growing for about that long, so up for about 9 months since the first employee was brought on. It's been cooking slowly but very efficiently, and very just trying to learn from every lesson and everything that we've learned in the past 2 years in creating an online game and making sure that we apply those to that project this time. So it's been a very organic growth over the last 9 months, and again, they exist on their own revenue. We've had enough money to get to that point through funds that were unrelated to MechWarrior. We're going to probably talk about this a lot throughout the town hall, but I think kind of setting the stage, the way I can summarize that is to say MechWarrior Online and the second project, they basically, they're only beholden to themselves. How long we develop MechWarrior Online and how much money and how much time and effort and energy and how much we put into it is exactly related to how much customers are willing to spend on the game. It's that simple. It's like if the customers are wanting more content and are supporting the game for more content, we'll exactly put that much development into MechWarrior Online. It's always been that way for us. We've always spent all the money that we've got on MechWarrior into MechWarrior, and we're always been guilty as a developer to, at many times, overspend on our development and put everything we have because we're always chasing a feature. So it's a long answer for the question, but I guess you can take that for what it is. It's a very simple answer in the end. It's MechWarrior money goes towards MechWarrior, and Project 2, they start to bring in money. Their money will go towards their project, and they'll be able to staff their project and run their project to whatever degree of support they can achieve.
All right, let's go and move on to the next question. You actually answered a few in there from a few people, such as Coin and Ninja Thor. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We have Yurik Mazzino. Hopefully I got that right. Probably not. He says, if you're self-publishing, do you have any plans to actually advertise your game? Like, say, taking a very good trailer for Community Warfare and taking it to some conventions like E3 or PAX and so forth. GGG and Path of Exile did the same thing with quite a bit of success. Their game is easy to find with articles. MW, on the other hand, is very tough to find for people that aren't already MechWarrior fans.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is very pertinent and something that we're thinking a lot about. And I guess the way I would answer that is there was a time when MechWarrior was definitely in the news a lot more. We did a lot more in the form of PR, and we did a lot more in the form of advertising and marketing. The quicker answer to this question, though, is simply that we've put that on hold. You haven't seen very much of that over the course of the last 4 to 6 months. That was really by design because we wanted to make sure that we completed. We really felt like completing, our path of the original vision and the 4 pillars, including planetary combat of community warfare, was critical for us to achieve. And once we achieved that aspect, then we were going to go out there and advertise and go after new players again. Because it won't really surprise anybody to hear that Mech Online is a very core game, and there's certainly lots of things that we could still do to improve the onboarding process so that new players can have an easier time adapting. But over the course of the project's lifespan, we have done quite a few of those things. And in the end, Mech 9 is still just a very core product that is hard for new players to learn how to play. So we really felt like, and this is going to be backtracking a little bit. We're going to cover this off a few times tonight, I'm sure. But I think that's why players, if they want to, I guess if we're here and we're admitting, any mistakes we've made in the past, things that didn't go perfectly, I think we also need to maybe give credit where credit's due and take a look back at the year 2014. I think most players would agree that 2014 has looked significantly different than 2013. And what I mean by that is, in 2013, as frustrating as it is here, I can't really argue with our players when they say, hey, development's really slow, and not a lot's getting done. And that was really a representation in 2013 of a couple things. And we've talked a bit about this in the past, but we maybe really haven't talked about kind of our relationship with IGP and how that played in. And don't take this as throwing blame completely in one direction, because that's not the way it is. And oftentimes you do need to make compromises when you have a partner. And over the course of the project, sure, if we were running things ourselves from the very start, I'm sure we would have done a lot of things a little differently, maybe even drastically differently in some cases. But sometimes you have to compromise. And 2013, I think, was a lot of time was spent on catching up on some of the backlog of pushing to get the initial open beta out when we did. Ideally, of course, even the original open beta, we're talking fall of 2012, should have been 6 months later. But there was some pressure there and a compromise with the partner to get it out sooner. So what happens then is we start to recover and try to catch up on a lot of debt that's incurred in the development cycle in 2013. Plus, there is a kind of a big drive from not only IGP, but we had desires in this way too, but there was certainly some pressure from them to work on the new player onboarding experience and some things that we saw get put in the game in 2013. Not all those things are bad ideas necessarily. We could argue about that, but that's not really the point I'm getting at. The point I'm getting at is 2013 saw not near as much forward progress as we would like to see. And we saw some good things like 12v12 that I still believe in greatly make it out, but there wasn't a lot else. There was a lot of little things, a lot of things that don't really get seen or that matter. All that cleanup in the background that makes it so the game can support the players it does today, and the tools and technology in the background that makes it possible to run a game like MechWarrior Online. But from the visual outward-looking features, there wasn't a lot. And so when 2014 came, you saw a big shift in mentality. I think it'd be fair to say that was kind of a bit of a break from IGP at that point. It was kind of the beginning of our negotiation. It almost in a way took about that long. And we said to ourselves in 2014, we're going to really focus on our players now, on our core players. So that means that we're not really going to be focusing on things that help new players. It means that we're probably not going to be advertising for, brand new players to MechWarrior. It means we're really going to be focusing on our core players. So I think if we're, calling out, blame where there is some, but also giving some credit where it was, I think 2014 set a brand new standard for the pacing of development in MechWarrior Online. And I just appeal to our players to reassess that and think about that for a second and say, you know what? I shouldn't be judging the entire time frame. I should be really looking at 2014 and see that we started out with UI 2.0, and there's a lot of work left to do in UI 2.0, but there's some significant aspects there. And then beyond that, we have launch module with full private matches. Beyond that, we have an entire clan invasion, and now we have unit creation, and now we're just a few short months from delivering planetary combat and community warfare. So 2014 pacing, I think we need to, we need to call that out and say, that's really good. That's a significant increase in pacing, and I think it's a good pace. It's an acceptable pace. So if we look at 2014 alone, we see that it's a much better pace. And coming back to the question on marketing and advertising, we need to finish this loop, stay focused, finish off the community warfare aspect, and then we're not done at that point. But I think at that point we can say to ourselves, all right, let's advertise again, let's market again. There's a lot more here. There's players can come now. They have, private matches and clans and everything, but there's people can invite them into a unit. They can get involved in the, community warfare and role playing. And, a lot of players that said, hey, I'll see you when community warfare comes out. Well, we'll be sure to let them all know as soon as it comes out, they should come back. And then we can market to those new players and focus on what's next for MechWarrior Online. So it's a long answer for why haven't we marketed much recently. I think it gives you some context as to maybe why we haven't been, but when we kind of expect that we will again.
All right, we're going to move into some questions about the lifespan. Actually, nope, we have one more question. This one is from Sandpit77. He says, why wouldn't you have explained all this months ago? Do you realize how this kind of open communication would have prevented most of the animosity in the community?
Okay, can you guys help me with exactly what is referring to and explaining what months ago? Is it
basically probably having an AMA and just maybe, I don't know if he's referring directly to the IGP stuff, the new project. I mean, obviously you're not going to announce the new project before you announce the new project. So
I think what he's referring to is obviously being open about things that are going on, and that some of the stuff, the animosity and sort of angst in the community going on would have been absolved if you'd have just been said, from a few months ago, hey, this is what's going on behind the scenes, guys. Please give us a little bit of time. Obviously, there's a lot of shuffling. I think that's basically the question.
He answered in chat basically everything you just said.
Okay. Well, there are some restrictions, as you might imagine. First off, I have been wanting to do a town hall type of thing for quite a while. And I don't want to come across like I'm throwing, our past relationship with IGP and everything like that as to blame for everything. It's not. A lot of times there were compromises and whatnot. But marketing was handled at IGP. And you look at everything prior to August, and that was with their marketing department in place. And things did move along a lot slower. And I don't think it's because, our marketing team's so much better or anything like that. I'm going to be definitely, I think it's better to just be kind in that regard and pretty much just look towards how much more efficient we can be with everything in the same office. So, for instance, I wanted to do a town hall type event before. And maybe ultimately, officially, if I just said, I'm having it, we're having it, let's go, I'm not sure that I could have necessarily been prevented, but it did fly in the face of the agreement and kind of a relationship we had. It really should have went through the marketing department, and they wanted to. There was a constant sort of debate of like, well, that's not really marketing, right? That's community management. And of course, for a while, their community management was more handled at IGP, and they kind of shifted more back to Piranha. So these are unfortunate inefficiencies, right? They're bad. They're not things that allow for the greatest efficiency with our community. And so you guys have seen some of those things change over the years. And I think, IGP was very process oriented, and I think that you have to be that way in some regards when you've got two different partners and you try to work with each other. But often process can become such a hindrance too, right? If I say, look, I want to have a town hall, and then 6 people weigh in and say, well, geez, what about this, that, or the other? That could be, what if someone asks this tough question? It's like, guys, I don't care. I can handle that. Let's talk about it. And that's just one way of answering your question. It didn't have as much freedom as we have now. And the second way I think of answering that would be that, of course, there are some restrictions on the negotiation process. In fact, I just got clearance today at about, well, within an hour of the post going up about Piranha and IGP coming to an agreement. Our contract, which we signed at the very end of August 30th, I think, states that we couldn't announce it, the deal, except through mutual signing off on an announcement in language. So as soon as that was done, I worked on that and I managed to get some approval today to put that up. So it really wasn't until today I could announce that was happening either. So there were some restrictions in the past. August, we got to work under our own marketing team, but still was kind of, call it, halfway transitioned. And I was kind of hobbled as to when I could announce anything until, like, legally, until just this afternoon. I think that's, I think that answers the question. That was the two main aspects of really explaining all of this stuff. Is I think that covers it. But
Yep.
If you guys, let me know if there's another aspect.
If we
I
miss
missed.
anything, we'll come back to it. Phil's got the next one.
All right, so moving on to the next sort of section is sort of the lifespan production of MWO. And the first question we have, and by the way, for everyone just tuning in, again, if you have a question, ask it. We are literally dropping down. If it's already been asked, then there's no point in putting it down. But we have 2 guys that are grabbing the questions and putting them on our doc, and we're literally going to be going through answering all of these on, as long as they're civil. So don't be an ass and you'll get your question answered. It's just, they're in the order that they come in, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and additionally, for anybody that wants to know, it's been asked a few times, this will be recorded. It's going to be highlighted on Twitch. It'll be posted on the YouTube page, and it will be posted as a podcast as well, so it'll be out there.
All right, so Russ, moving on to sort of the production lifespan of MWO, and this is a big topic, and I think a lot of people are, this is where their angst is Ski 2060S. Its Project 2 has its own dev team for the most part. How do you see MWO going out from here on out? Faster cycles, more discretion and patching, and concept integration? Discretion? Like, basically, are we going to see more content and a faster paced cycle? I think that's basically what he's asking.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I want to say yes, but I want to be a cautious yes, because I think you have to accept the notion that I just presented, that 2014 was a very different animal than 2013. If you reject that notion entirely, I'm not sure I can please you moving forward. The team size is what it is. It's a decent team. It's a moderate-sized team. It's small compared to giant games of today's standard, of course, but not bad also for an ongoing online free-to-play game that is entering 2 years from open beta to still have, it's, well, if you count QA, now you have to count kind of QA and customer support, which maybe I won't. It's just more about developers that, make an impact on features or content. You're still in the, mid 30 range, which is a pretty, decent sized team for a game that's this mature. But again, I think that 2014 is a pretty good example of the productivity level that we can achieve. I think we can do a little better. I do. Basically, here's one example of it. And they're small things, but they really add up. Our ability to react to just making sure the patches are a little better, just get those last 1 or 2 things in and get approved in time for patching is just a little bit better for us now. And that's because, well, let's just look at the notion that, again, everything is in-house here. So just today, we're approving our patch for tomorrow. The normal process before would be, of course, we have a stable stage live process. So everything that's going to go on the patch, I know a lot of times people get out there, maybe aren't as familiar with game development processes, and say, if I say, yeah, that's a good you found a bug. We're going to fix that. That a lot of people might say, great, so there's a hotfix tomorrow, right? Well, we can't really do that. That breaks the process and is too risky for an online game development, especially when in an online game that the entire company and certainly the entire product team is depending on this game being up and running and not broken. So everything has to go in a stable stage live process. So everything hits stable, and the idea is it stays in stable for essentially 2 weeks. And all the features that are good, so all the features are going to go out for a patch. We were finished 2 weeks ahead of time. So that means the stuff that we're working on during those 2 weeks isn't going to make it till the next patch. So at any rate, just a little refresher there. And everything gets done for stable towards the end. The last 1 or 2 days before we patch, we go to stage, and that's we're testing the final build. And if that final build makes it through, we go live. If we have to patch it, worst case, we do, but before we go live. So before, like just today, we tested stable and we actually went to stage. Our internal development team was able to get that build at about 1 this afternoon, the final stage, and spent the next 4 hours confirming that stage. And I haven't seen the official confirmation yet, but essentially confirm that build is going out tomorrow. In the past with IGP in Montreal, there's a 3-hour time difference. So by the time the build was up, you'd have QA potentially getting off work in Montreal. And so they wouldn't get that build until the following morning. And boy, if there's any kind of a problem that happens with that stage build, we don't get in until 9 the next morning. It's noon there already. Everyone's scrambling to kind of make that time difference work. So that's a very small example of increased efficiency. Marketing, I think, is another one that helps a lot. You've seen that with the August events. We had a meeting today, and essentially today in that meeting we decided what this weekend's sale was going to be, what this weekend's event was going to be, and a number of other things all in the course of one meeting. Whereas before, boy, oh boy, that was tough. That was one of our biggest frustrations. It was just really difficult, and I'm sure it was really difficult for IGP too, because they had to contact us and see if we liked their ideas, and we weren't in the same meetings. That was tough. So I think that's kind of examples of just how the live operations of things gets a lot more effective. But let me get into more how there could be some improvements on 2014 productivity moving forward. I still think there is some room for more productivity than even we've seen so far in 2014 when it comes to real features, because essentially now I really am running MechWarrior online, whereas before, and with the help of my partner Brian, but I would meet with the team and discuss the feature set, but there was always, at least some level of opinion, coming from IGP saying, oh, we don't necessarily agree that that's important, that that's important to our community right now. We should be working on this, that, or the other. And oftentimes that just leads to inefficiencies. So now we definitely live or die by our own decisions. We say, we think the customers in the community wants this. This is what's important. We're working on it. All those same decisions happen in the same meeting, and we're very focused on creating those features. So obviously, community warfare module 2+ is even unit creation was pretty much a part of that process on our own. That came together very quickly within a month of work and a few weeks of tests. So long answer again, but I think it was worth it. I think again, our baseline is looking at 2014 and accepting that was a pretty significant improvement over 2013 and acceptable pacing. And then I'm now telling you that, I think we can do a little better on all fronts now than we've done, at the first 9 months of 2014. So if that sounds good to you, then great, you're happy. If it's if you feel like there should be 10 times the pacing, then that's just not realistic for a team of 35 when a good half of those people are content creating. They're not actually creating features, but they're creating mechs and the things that, the content that you want to see. So I think our pacing for a development team of that size is real close. I think we can still increase our efficiency for the rest of 2014 and moving forward, but we're close to being happy with that. So I hope that'll give some more perspective on that.
Okay, Russ, to sort of lump in, I'm getting a lot of questions here that I can basically see are stemming from one sort of concern. And that concern is a lot of people out there are wondering, hey, you guys are announcing another project, right? You guys aren't even done with community warfare, right? There's still a lot of polishing that can be done, let alone some of the core features that you guys have promised, from back in the day and even, since September of last year, community warfare wise. Also, there's a lot of angst and concern of, hey, you guys just announced this new project. When are these other features and is that going to affect the development process of MWO? That's really the heart of it, is the fact of, hey, you promised all these things, we want these things, and from a fan standpoint, we expect those to be worked on and done before you guys were to move on to another project. I mean, would you like to comment just sort of on that decision?
Yeah, of course. That's a good question. I understand the question from the player's perspective. A simple statement to start that off might be is that there's very few things in business less efficient than um, a one game studio in game development. A one game studio is extremely inefficient. I'm sure if that one product is League of Legends or World of Tanks or some massive success, it's not a problem. If you're a more modest sized game, it's extremely expensive to run all the overhead and infrastructure of a company like Piranha Games, office space and internet and rent and um, yeah, HR and every aspect that it takes to run a studio with one project. In fact, this is the longest we've ever been on one project only ever in over our 15 years by a long shot. We've been a one project studio now for over 3 years. That's significant. That's a significant commitment and investment by us saying we're betting the whole company on this one game. It was just time for us to improve those efficiencies overall and economies of scale. But I think this is now a good opportunity for me to kind of bring something else up, which I'd like to present to all the listenership for your judgment and see if I can change your thinking on something a little bit. I know we've got a lot of players out there, and this has got to be one of the most passionate fan bases in the world. It just is. I don't care what anyone says. It just has to be, right? I mean, people that like MechWarrior, they like it a lot. I mean, they all have strong opinions about what it should be. But I think we also have to accept the baseline understanding if we're going to have any kind of an understanding moving forward, together, between Piranha and its community. And what I mean by that is I'm here to accept, where mistakes have been made and own the fact that community warfare isn't in your hands yet. And that's an unfulfilled delivery promise on that fourth pillar of the original game. But I also see significant comments, from our players that I think Paul just distracted me in chat. Don't do that, Paul. Sorry about that. I think if we just had an understanding from our players, if we look at the original pillars, and I think we have, if I'm honest with you about community warfare and saying, hey, we haven't delivered that yet, I think we have to look at the entire four pillars and take a look at them and see what the process is, because I've seen a significant, well, not significant, but there's a few players, and I see comments like, hey, you haven't delivered anything in 2 years. And I think, okay, I don't even know what to say to that, because, I've seen, I went down earlier I was doing kind of a rundown here with some of the guys, and, this is just in 2014, which is like, there's some greater visual customizations for a lot of the mechs, a lot of hitbox fixes. I'm just going to go on this list we came up with, basically looking at patch notes for the game. Map collision fixes, UI 2.0, we had the turrets and assault game, tier 1 weapon modules, we did some jump jet tuning, DirectX 11 support, achievements were added, whole state rewind, improvements and fixes, of course, with SRM, The new matchmaker went in, which is a significant improvement. I mean, we're going to talk about ELO and some of the players' concerns in a bit, but basically, from the solo queue perspective, and now the fact that we can have group supports of 2 through 12, private matches. We got the new consumable screen, track IR support, clans were added. We did the whole targeting computers, command consoles, consumable auto refills, unit creation module. It's a huge amount of work, but I talked about that a minute ago in the pacing of 2014, but let's look at those original pillars. We really have to be just honest and not admitting, even if admitting what we've completed to this point in time is not some admission by the community that says, hey, yeah, you're right, you're done, you don't have to work anymore. That's not what we're asking for. I mean, we've often said this game is never going to be complete, right? There is no final product. We work on this game as long as we possibly can. But if we look at the original pillars, there's mech warfare. And sure, there's probably tons of people out there to say, boy, you really could do this, that, or the other. But looking at the definition and description of what we said with mech warfare is, we have significant and very cool and very fun mech combat. I don't think there'd be anyone that would say, look, you haven't fulfilled that pillar of mech combat. We look at information warfare. The original design that we pitched to the publishers back before we even started MechWarrior Online, and that was carried over into MechWarrior Online, was saying, hey guys, this isn't going to be like the MechWarrior games of the past where you just press R or T or whatever the target button was at the time, get the big red reticle, and essentially it doesn't matter how many buildings or hills that mech ran behind, that red box just stays there, and you have them targeted forever. No, you're going to have to be get line of sight or get your teammates to pass that target information to you, or use UAV drones and all those other aspects of things. Sure, there's a lot further we could go with it, but we have delivered that information warfare pillar as originally described. The other one would be, of course, role warfare. Again, as originally pitched to those people and as we pitched to everybody, says we are not going to have an arms race game. We're not going to make a game where essentially nobody uses lights. You only get a light until you get enough money to get this one, and then you get that one, then you get that one, and then pretty soon the end game is every single player is out there in the exact same jump capable assault mech. So yes, there's more work we can do. Indefinite amount of work. There's no end in sight to how much work we can do. But the original vision of what that pillar was has been delivered. Community warfare, if we focus on that now, it's not done yet. It hasn't been delivered. It's the missing piece. We have unit creation in, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later. We're now just a few short months away from delivering that final pillar to everybody, which is the planetary conquest. So I think if we look at it in that light and say, I can't really work with, hey, you guys haven't done anything in 2 years. Not with, what I list off for what we've done just in 2014. And if you look at the initial post and the initial vision of the 4 pillars, we're just a few short months away from delivering that final pillar. And I think a lot of people maybe have fear, and if they admit, say, okay, that's fair, Russ, I think you're right, that's true. I think they feel like, uh-oh, that means that they're done. In a few short months from now, they're finished, they're not going to work on it anymore. That's not the case. And it's not to say the 4 pillars are finished and we're never going to work on them again. As I said a minute ago, those 4 pillars are things that will be worked on indefinitely. They'll be improved indefinitely. So I just think I wanted to throw that out there. And we were applying to the question. Now you need to bring me back on track there, Phil. We were talking about...
well, just basically...
Just the future.
Yeah, I mean, when looking at the decision to start, Project 2, and you answered that, and then looking at, MWO as far as the development process isn't done, a lot of people would say, hey, slow it up. Like, hey, you need to explain yourself. Like we get, you want to expand as a company, right? But as a fan...
Yes, sorry, thanks, Phil. Thanks for bringing me back on track. I just, I remember the question now, so that's where I went with that. So basically, yes, we went a significant amount of time without starting another project, and we waited as long as we could. And I think we thought we'd have another project going probably at least a year sooner, but we didn't. We waited. We wanted to get there. And ideally, we wanted to get all the way. Ideally, we could have waited even just another quarter, to the beginning of 2015, but timing just wasn't right. Timing wasn't going to wait for us. And so, I wanted to also just throw that out there about the 4 pillars and say, look, we're just a few short months away from delivering on that final pillar. And then, great, then we can continue to work on, those 4 pillars indefinitely. And, we need to talk about what's 2015 and onward looking like for MechWar Online. What's the big thing after community warfare? Again, assuming the 4 pillars are always in a constant evolving and growing and getting better, what's the next big feature beyond that? And we're talking about, quarter 1 of 2015. We're talking about just early in the next year, we'll be in a position to think about that and start working on that. So just knowing that, again, reiterates the point that, hey guys, let's do a reset on this whole 4 pillar thinking and realize that, we are just a few short months from delivering the final one, and then away we go. It's hard for me to stop talking about that subject. I was in very,
No, it's okay.
very
Actually,
passionate about it, and just like I wanted to really get that out there because I think it's fair. I think if we're being fair here, I think that's a fair comment too.
absolutely. And that actually leads right into the next question, which Mung Fu Sensei asks, it's been stated that PGI has 6 years left on the license to MechWarrior. Do you have any content planned to fill up those 6 years and hopefully beyond, or are you still playing it all by ear once community warfare is out?
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. Mung Fu Sensei says it's stated that PGI has 6 years left on the license for MechWarrior. Do you have content planned to fill up those 6 years and hopefully beyond, or are you just playing it by ear after community warfare is out?
Yeah, great question. No, we don't. We don't have content planned for all of it. Not by a long shot. We're so focused on just trying to complete those 4 pillars and get community warfare out there. So that's been consuming us all year long, working towards that. At least finally, we're working on that final element, and definitely remind you to talk about community warfare module 2. We got to do that tonight. Give you a few more details on that. So with that in mind, though, yeah, what's after this? I mean, there's one giant elephant in the room beyond community warfare that I think everyone's thinking of. And who wants to be the first one to say it? I mean, somebody.
Wait, are you talking about clans and balance?
I'm looking for chat. No, come on, you failed me, Phil. No, of course that's a topic, but I just, to me, I think we need to take a real serious look at single player, or what does that mean for MechWarrior Online? Is it significant PvE features, or is it full-blown single player? So I think there's no doubt we've got to start thinking about that after 2015. And MechWarrior Online will always be the multiplayer component moving forward. It'll be the core multiplayer component for MechWarrior for the next number of years, and just will get better and better. But we've got to think about how long it's been since the last proper single player content in the MechWarrior universe. And we've got all these mechs, all this content. I'm going to want to start gathering feedback and opinions from our players on this. Do they see it as full-blown single player, or do they see it as significant player versus environment features built into MechWarrior Online, in a way that they're playing in a co-op sense? Is that more interesting to them? But it definitely comes down to, player versus environment, whether that's single player or not. That would, to me, I think is the significant question that we need to ask ourselves coming into 2015. And if the player base still says, no, let's take another 6 months of 2015 to do nothing but focus on the 4 pillars and all the polish that we need for those 4 pillars. I can think of lots like significant collision, which if you want to bring up later, we can talk about mech collision and where we're at with that. There's obviously a number of things that still be on the list of saying, okay, let's do these things for 6 months and then we'll talk about single player. But I just wanted to throw that out there for the community too, to say you can look at the fact that P2 is being announced and there might be opportunities for players to become involved and commit, their vote through, their wallet to say, hey, I want to help this second game grow, and that's great. Look forward to your vote on that project. But I think I just wanted everyone to know that there definitely will be opportunities for you to, continue to craft the future of MechWarrior. Um, so I guess that answers the question. That's as far as I can really go with that question. I think after community warfare is out, we've got some big holes still, mech collisions and a number of things that we need to get our attention turned to continue to improve and polish. So there's that, and then there's the concept of PvE single player that needs to be discussed. But that's it.
Okay.
I know that the players want more. They want some say, and I think oftentimes there's been a little bit of frustration, people feeling like they haven't been listened to. I think oftentimes we try to understand that sentiment because we really do feel like we're listening all the time and trying to react to everything, but we just can't please everybody. So there's always some group that feels like we don't listen to them, but we've tried, and I think as we move forward in 2015, I think there will be, because we've completed the fourth pillar. At that point, there will be significant more opportunity for us to listen and say, okay, they want this, they want that, and we won't feel like, well, shit, we really can't give them that because we haven't finished community warfare yet. That will be behind us. So we will be able to react more to your vote as to what that content should be.
All right, so we have two questions that sort of follow along with what you were just talking about. We've got SGR Gut and Cavell, and basically they sort of hinder on the community warfare and the aspect of, are we going to see speeding up of actual development on community warfare now that IGP is out of the picture? And because of IGP is out of the picture and you are hiring more staff for Project 2, are you also bringing on more staff for MWO as far as engineers to be able to speed up the process?
Well, no, I think it's consistency here that MechWarrior 9 is, at this very moment, I'd answer that question to say it's status quo for MechWarrior Online. The MechWarrior Online team is what it is, and it's achieved a symbiance of a relationship with its community and the revenues from that community on a month-to-month basis, and we're committed to keeping that in place. So that just drives home the point that the two projects don't feed off each other, rob from each other from a revenue standpoint. They run themselves based on the viability of their game. So the team size for MechWarrior Online is directly related to the viability of the product. And right now, that's a very nice, healthy team size that's determined by our customers, and it is what it is right now currently. So if it was to grow, perhaps there's that potential as we get closer and closer here to planetary combat coming back, and us trying to re-engage all of our players, everyone that's ever signed up for MechWarrior Online in the past 3 years, and let them all know through marketing and through email blasts that says, hey, it's here now. Sorry it took so long. Come play. And growing our team, growing our community and player base and potentially revenue base, and that means we can grow the team. And we're committed to. We're not going in. One thing I've seen this a few times, and this is maybe a way to finish off that answer, is we're not going into maintenance mode. We're not going into like, okay, from here on out, we just pump out a map and a mech, and that's it. We're committed to creating features to the extent of the viability of the product indefinitely.
Okay, I think where
All right.
those questions stem is just from the point that you guys are doing another project. They may be separate financially behind the scenes, but from a fan's perspective of that means you're financially aware that you can support those, or you should be able to support. And if MWO is sort of your moneymaker right now, that developing time and resources, i.e. more developers into that and or engineers, ultimately means better product for us, the players, and then that means more money for you in the end. I think that's where that sort of questions stem from.
We'll move on to this. These are a couple questions that I'll combine as one. It's kind of business practices, etc. MW Aiden asks, so why not switch MWO over to a monthly subscription rather than free to play? And I'll combine that with Tizcatly asks, now that you have full control of the game's every aspect, will we be seeing MWO on Steam? So monthly subscription and or Steam.
Well, monthly subscriptions, I doubt there's very many people that feel that way. That could be corrected, but right now, you have the ability to put a premium account on in the game, and right now we already are far and away more lenient than other products are when it comes to what's required for having a premium account. In other competitive games, you can't even create a group of 3 unless you have a premium account. And you have to have a premium account to do a number of other things. In our game right now, there's really nothing required except for the premium options on private matches. But even still, of course, there's a lot of comments as to, hey, why do we have to have a premium account for essentially anything? So I don't know if that's, a question that a lot of people want answered or not. I guess I've never really, I think beyond that answer, we've seen in the industry that people just don't want that. The latest MMOs to come out just have not done very well that have been traditional monthly subscriptions. Most of them have made the switch. There's maybe a few hanging on to the old model, but essentially people would view us as kind of going back into the dark ages a little bit. So, and I think our customers have kind of voted that way too. And it says there's a lot of expectations, and I don't know. I think, hey, if you guys want to start a poll and convince me otherwise, but I
What
don't
about
think.
Steam?
I think we're going to definitely consider Steam very seriously. It's one of those things we've steered clear of it for a very simple reason that, one, our core community knows about MechWarrior, knows where it is, knows how to play it. We don't necessarily need to discover them, right? Anyone who's a hardcore fan of MechWarrior knows about the game and is here. Now, we don't need to give Steam 30% of our revenue to capture those same people, right? That would be foolish. Since we've captured those people, there is something to be said about capturing new players, and that's basically the best way on earth for PC gamers to capture them, or PC developers, is through Steam. Their reach is significant. I think our target for considering that is, again, the completion of Community Warfare Planetary Combat, and perhaps in the early in the new year we will ask ourselves again if now might be the good time, because we've captured all of our core players and now they have Planetary Combat, but now might be a good time to launch on Steam, capture the many thousands they can bring our way, and we have the content to retain them. So that will be the debate that we'll have again with ourselves here in the next little while.
Okay, we got another question from the Weentastic. This is sort of a generalized, I'm sure all developers have this, but he asks, Rust people here are still very much concerned with the decisions you made in the past and, have lost faith in PGI. Some people move on. How do you intend to regain that faith from the people who've already, spent money on the game?
I always find this question extremely difficult to answer. I would ask, even if the user's still in the chat, provide us some more information, because I do get this every once in a while, whether it's a private message or something, and I think to myself, I think from my perspective here, we feel like you can't find any more passionate people about brand in the world. We work, I don't know how many hours a week. We care deeply. We feel like we're pumping out content, as fast as our team can manage it, and our pacing in 2014 has been very good and is getting better. And the reception of clans and the technology and everything was excellent. Private matches are great, and unit creation's good. And I get a question like that, and I'm thinking, okay, you got to help me out. Like, what decision made you lose faith? We got to get specific here, otherwise I'm just guessing that you in particular are someone that didn't like Ghost Heat, or you are someone in particular who, you know, I'm not sure, pick something else, and that's the thing that says, that's it, I lose faith, I'm out. So I can talk generally about it and say, each of those decisions are based on what we feel the majority of our player base is asking for at the time. We feel like we're getting players that say, guys, I am not going to stay here and play anymore if I'm getting hit with 6 PPCs in one location. I'm not into it. That's not fun. That's not Battletech. This is lame. And so we had to make a decision at some point, and I'm picking one particular subject here. I'm talking about Ghost Heat. I can't believe I'm using that term. Heat Scale, excuse me. I'm talking about Heat Scale. In that particular case, it's from our perspective and what we felt our players wanted, is saying MechWarrior Online is going to be more like tabletop. To me, when you play tabletop, it's much more of a battle of attrition. We can't really simulate most of that because we're not rolling dice. We're not saying, hey, I know you pointed at a CT, but we just decided randomly that you hit the left leg and missed because, you had a bad roll. It's not the kind of game it is, right? It's a skill-based game. So we have to simulate lowering that pinpoint damage in new ways that other games haven't tried to do. So we make some decisions, and we get significant amounts of our player base that say, this is great. Now people are brawling. I'm living longer. And in fact, we've gotten to the point now where I get much more requests for, like, what are you going to do to lower the pinpoint damage? Can you put spread ballistics on Innisphere autocannons as well? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? They want to see it lowered. Right now it's kind of more in the 30-ish range. They want to see it lowered. They want to see things added to Heat Scale. They want to see that type of gameplay perpetuated. I see more of that now, a lot of requests like that. But getting back to the point, there are some individuals that have a different opinion of what's fun, and maybe it has to do with where they came up in MechWarrior, a particular game, perhaps in MechWarrior 4 multiplayer or something that allowed for significant, boats of different types. And for them, that's fun, and that's what they expected. So when the game doesn't go in that direction, it's simply a kind of a generic statement that says, I've lost faith, I'm out. And we say, well, that really sucks. We care deeply about that customer, but he wants something that all these people don't want. We've got to pick a side, and not everyone's going to be happy. We try to find a place that's a happy medium. So for instance, when people want to remove it, the pinpoint damage right down to nothing, we're not going there too. We have a lot of people saying you need to lower it even more. We have a lot of people saying, hey, you should get rid of Heat Scale and bring it right back. So we try to find a spot. We say, okay, here's a pretty good spot in the middle. We're trying to limit the pinpoint alpha damage to about this, to the current, where the game is currently. And we say, this is a good spot in the middle where if you're an alpha style player, you can still achieve, this much of a pinpoint damage and build your mechs that way. If you want to play the other way, you feel like maybe you can play that way and still compete and not get totally, get holes punched in your mech the second you turn a corner. So right now, believe it or not, you're seeing what we feel is sort of a balance between the two great opinions of how MechWarrior should play. There is no limit to my alpha and how much my pinpoint damage I can put on your mech. I see you first, I punch a hole in your mech, I win. To the complete opposite style of play. We're kind of right in the middle there now, and it's a happy medium. But I don't know if that discussion point can ever be fully solved, because it really does come down to opposing opinions of what's fun to a player, and depending on what MechWarrior games they've played in the past. So I had to pick one example there that someone might say, I lost faith, etc., and what are you going to do to restore that faith? But that's an example of how difficult it is when I hear that question, because I don't know in particular what it is. And I don't know for sure if I can change the choice we made, because there's just as many players or more that say, no, I disagree with that. It should be this way. So I'm sorry. I hope you appreciate the difficulty of that question. If you want to give me more details on specifically, I'd be glad to touch on that instead.
We'll keep our eye out for more details. I'm going to combine two questions regarding map production. The first one, and I'm sorry, I can't find it on the sheet here, so I don't remember who it's from, but it was basically along the lines of, now that you've been in development for about 3 years, do maps still cost 250,000-ish or whatever the price was to make, considering that you have, a bunch of established assets or whatever? And then the second one is, this is from Coffee Nail, will you allow community developed maps?
Great. Yeah, I'm going to jump back real quick. I thought of something. I guess I should have concluded that other comment off by saying, well, I want that individual who feels like maybe they've been burned to consider that if it's about features and meeting feature deadlines, that you consider a reboot of your thinking and giving us a chance, if we're admitting our mistakes here, and saying, in 2014, we've done a pretty darn good job of hitting our deadlines and the dates we've set for ourselves. I think at a couple times in launch mods or unit creation, we might have gone a week over the original date that we proposed. So when it came down to the date when we finally announced it for UI, private matches, clans, unit creation, and some other aspects, we've hit those dates, and we are still gunning for late this fall, planetary combat, and we're pulling out all the stops. We're going to do everything we can to hit that. So that is showing a track record of meeting deadlines and doing what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do it. So I'm admitting, our mistakes, especially in 2013, the fact that we haven't delivered planetary combat yet. But I think, again, giving us a benefit of, the past 9 months and saying, okay, maybe that's, instead of a specific example, that's something that can rebuild faith, and, should give us another shot based on that. But let me jump ahead to maps. No, they don't. They don't cost that much anymore. They don't cost anywhere near that much. That number is, an extreme number. That's probably the very, very peak of like the very first urban maps we made, or something. You were creating every single asset and developing everything from, how that big map is going to work, and it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of R&D still in those beginning months, and so not every single one of the original maps cost that much, but it's an extreme number in the high end. But they were expensive to make. There was at one point a team of half a dozen or so full-time artists and level designers putting those maps together, establishing an art style, and I think they're I think they're pretty. They look nice. They it was worth establishing that pipeline. But I think a great example of the new and improved pipeline now, and it does come with some trade-offs, but let's say Industrial City. Well, Industrial City has very little in the way of brand new assets, right? It's pretty much some industrial looking assets from other maps, and just with a few smattering of new objects and a new terrain map, and you create a map, but it still looks really cool. It looks gorgeous. It looks great. That's the advantage that we have now, since we have all that content. So I know there's concerns about map production. That can be frustrating for us too, and I will I will throw IGP under the bus for this. Sorry guys if you're listening, but we wanted to continue map production, but I won't get into the business reasons, but we didn't have support from IGP on that over the past 6 months. We pretty much were forced to put those resources into making sure we deliver the clan mechs on time. So when we did switch back to it, though, the good news is when we switched back, we knew we had to do it differently. We had to do it much more efficiently. So the Industrial City map was pretty much, we have one level designer full-time on that, with some support from our art director and perhaps one other artist here and there. It's definitely no more than 2 full-time bodies at the most, maybe even a little less than that. So it's significantly less. It's tough for me to make a guess, but maybe as low as 40, a little less. Still good money, but obviously that's a massive improvement. And the trade-off is we have to stay within, the asset types we have, right? If you're going to create a brand new map of something you've never done before, the pyramid setting with, ancient ruins or something, those are just assets we don't have, so that would go back into a much more expensive mode. But as long as we utilize the sets we have, we can do them at a much more better price point and even quicker. So the industrial city map was probably only about 2 months all in. You touch more than that when we get into the testing mode and whatnot. That's set to come out September 23rd. It's going into stable branch tomorrow, or tomorrow Wednesday, and pulling out all the stops to make sure that gets into your hands to patch after the one that comes out tomorrow. And the guys are already working on Swamp. Now, Swamp kind of represents the last of a new asset set, but it was kind of already half done. So it's a little more work than Industrial City, but we had a lot of it done, so we want to get it finished. And then those maps are done. And then we look at the future and we say, okay, for future maps, and whether that's community created or communicated or created by us, it's going to have to exist within those sets. So we've got obviously a forest set, we've got an alpine set, we've got city environments, everything you see in the city maps. Got the caustic and terra firma and tourmaline, the frozen cities. So we can come up with combinations of that. We can say, okay, let's do a forest colony meets alpine valley setting. Very interesting. It would look really cool. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't think we're going to be feeling the pressure of like, oh damn, we need more brand new texture sets, at least not for a while. There's a significant number of maps we could work on doing that. So a little more on the community side. I said this in a vlog, I'll say it again. I want to finish Industrial City, basically there. I'm going to finish the Swamp map. And then when I get Community Warfare out, and Community Warfare has a new map with a new game mode in it. I'm sure you guys are glad to hear that. It's a very specific to Community Warfare, attack, defend, game mode. And there's going to be a little bit of map work done there. So I view it lining up with the completion of Community Warfare and Planetary Conquest. And after that point, perhaps in the very early new year, we can think about community created. But I guess I want to set expectations here. It still is a closed environment, the game, meaning, it's hosted in our data center. So any system we come up with, it's not just going to be the Wild West, where it's like everyone's running a server with their own maps. We're going to have to come up with a process that is maybe a drawing competition, come up with a design for a map or two to guide us, and potentially let some people work on stuff up there. But that we haven't figured it out yet. We're gonna have to try and figure that out, because obviously it's got to meet the quality criteria we've set out for our game. It's got to fit within the game. It's got to look like it belongs and it was created by the same people and is at the same quality level. So I know there's some talented guys out there. I know there's guys out there among you that can do that if you're given the assets. I don't really doubt that. It's a matter of trying to figure it out, though. So there you go. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of blaming IGP, which of course we're not here to do, but there's been several questions along these lines, so I'm going to kind of just condense it into one question, which is, how much did IGP influence the push on, you mentioned a little bit of it, so maybe you can expand, the push for getting the clan mechs out when they were released, and did that affect the development of Community Warfare at all?
Well, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that it affected the development of Community Warfare. But that's an interesting question. It's not something I can lay at IGP's feet, really. We were receiving a pretty significant amount of pressure to see the clan mechs released. People want them, they love them, and not to mention the fact that, kind of sitting around and asking ourselves, what the hell is Community Warfare going to be if not about Innisphere versus clans? So yeah, we could, I guess, make it about the 5 factions, but we'd already set a timeline for ourselves at 3050. So we could roll that timeline back and make it just about Innisphere. But I think you see the conundrum we're in. And so even though it's a really tough decision, it's like, okay, we've got to get clan mechs out for community warfare, because what people want to see and what our goal was right from the get-go is be this first game to truly simulate the clan invasion. And I don't mean, all clan mechs shooting each other all the time, or Innisphere mechs just using clan weapons, so they're kind of the same thing, fighting them. I mean, truly solve the problem, truly create an environment where the clans are invading and the Innisphere is defending, and it's simulating the storyline. It's a tough fight, and I'm sure we can, this talk might need to go on past 8. There's so many subjects. I keep saying bring this up later, but, we can talk about clan Innisphere balance at some point here, and, how that plays into what we want to achieve. We want to achieve that combat. So I don't know that I really looked IGP at that one, really joint decision. Maybe we had different motivations for why the clan should come out, but certainly we had motivations there too, saying, okay, we really need the clans. We need to get clans out so that we can have community warfare, so that it can be Innisphere versus clans. Otherwise, if we would have released community warfare, planetary combat, I think we would have immediately just been under heat to like, what the hell is this? Where's the clan mix? So,
Question.
It's a tough one. It was a catch-22 there, really.
Something to go along that lines, Russ. I mean, so okay, you IGP and PGI both had reasons for wanting the clan mechs. Would you, looking back, would you have said, hey, we're not actually going to introduce the clans until closer to community warfare is done? Like, would you have taken the time, and would the clans came out when they did, or would you have waited?
No, I cannot bring myself to regret releasing the clans. I think they're great. I think they're awesome. I think they're beautiful. I think they're super fun. And you guys have seen how much work they are. I mean, when I list off that little 2014 list, please don't look at the clans as like, well, it's just content, it's just mechs. They really aren't. Maybe Phoenix mechs were just content and just mechs, but the clan mechs were massive amounts of work. I mean, we basically doubled up on inventory, weapon types, balancing efforts. We changed how the HUD looks, how it sounds, how it feels, how we model the cockpits. We couldn't just when the models were done, we couldn't just put them in the game. We had to create a significant amount of code in the gameplay side and everywhere. The Omnipod system in the mech lab. I mean, there's just a ton of work. There are massive amounts of work, and we're not even done yet. I think we need, the next few weeks, the next couple months, to continue to fine-tune the relationship that the clan mechs have in our game with Innisphere mechs, so that when community warfare is released, it works, right? So I think waiting till we were closer wouldn't have been a good decision. It would have meant that we weren't ready for the Innisphere versus clans battle. The clans were just that much work and that much work to balance. So, no, I think it's unfortunate. There's some unfortunate hindsight there, but it wouldn't be like, do I wish I changed my plans around when the clan mechs were released? I would probably, if I was to say anything about that, I probably would have started to work on clan mechs sooner. But it's hard to think back and say, 2013, no doubt, we don't need to rehash that again. There's things I would have done instead of the things we did. There was time in 2013 to focus on something like clans, and therefore maybe be 6 months ahead of the game, so that by the middle of 2014, planetary combat is released instead of the end of 2014. So it's a tough game to play, hindsight, but I wouldn't quite answer your question like we should have done it later or waited. Probably just should have done something. Probably should have worked on that technology sooner in 2013 instead of some of the other things that were worked on.
That sounds good. Okay, Phil is queuing up the next question, but before we get to that, first of all, I want to say we got about 1,000 people here. Thank you all for showing up tonight. We totally appreciate it. This is a town hall meeting with Russ Bullock, president of Piranha Games. Now, for those of you that showed up late and missed earlier questions, this will be highlighted on Twitch. It'll be uploaded to YouTube, and it'll also be posted as a podcast. So there'll be a lot of ways for you to catch up on what was missed. And Russ, since this does look like it's going to go to 8 and pretty much for sure beyond, if you're willing to stick around, would you like to take like a quick 5-minute break or anything, or do you want to just keep going? What do you want to do at this point?
Let's hit till 7:30 and then do a quick one.
All right. Phil,
All right.
take it away.
So the next question is actually something that I feel is really important, and this is asked by Peter 2000, and he says, you mentioned player retention earlier, and you mentioned that new player experience, this game is very difficult to get into. What are, or do you have any plans to change that new player experience, considering the difficulty coming in, as well as the business and pricing model? Obviously, it is a free to play. How are we going to help the new players come in here? And then what are you guys going to be doing to help them stay here and continue basically being fans and players, but also, customers for you guys?
Well, that is the great question. Basically, it's really simple answer though. We've had a design, even back in the IGP days from some of their guys too. We call it FTUE, FTUE, first time user experience. So, we've done some things we've changed the landing page. We've, popped up a window. If you did a fresh install recently with a new account, it'll ask if you want to play the tutorial upon the first time. Other things that were developed and created specifically for new players. And we had this document called First Time User Experience. Was a significant amount of work in the front end to, whether it was through it's tying the cadet bonus in with the achievement system in a very fluid way. Some of that's in place, as you see, if you're going through the cadet bonus for the first time, but it's just taking that like 10 steps further to like hand-holding new players through the UI and rewarding them. And okay, you completed this many matches, here's a mech, and all sorts of stuff. And that's a tough problem to solve because it takes significant time to do. And every time you turn your attention to it, your core fan base is being neglected. But you're not necessarily, generating specific revenue that you can apply to that without deflecting from core features. So that's always a challenging battle, and that essentially sums up 2013, which we've already talked about. I think the shorter answer is then that we just don't have time right now to spend in that first time user experience in the front end, because those resources are spoken for throughout the end of the year. And those resources, what you want them to work on: community warfare, planetary combat. There's going to be some new screens and new UI work in the front end to support that. And any spare cycles I get between here and the new year are going to be on further. A couple months ago, you guys saw some pretty nice, significant improvements to UI 2.0, a lot of cleaning up, a lot of filter problems fixed up, just a lot of crappy little things fixed up. There's still, a huge list of those things. If I have some spare cycles, I want them to get to work on, not the least of which is, of course, a Smurfy style, interactive of the overveiled mech overview details window. That's important to people. There's a bunch of stuff like that. The store needs significant work. I mean, that's a big way for us to make revenue, and the store sucks. I mean, by example, someone was buying a mech the other day internally, and they went to the store and they said, "What are you doing? You don't go to the store to buy a mech. You go to Mech Lab and use the purchasable tab, and you can filter that way, and it's easier to find it." So there's a lot of work left there. And so the end of the year, between here and the end of the year, is UI 2.0, or sorry, first off, community warfare and UI 2.0, and those resources are going to be tapped out on that stuff, delivering those things to our core customers, you guys. Only then, really, the first of the new year, will I be able to turn any attention back to like, okay, now that we've delivered those features, we can work on some of this first-time user experience stuff. So that's how we've designated those resources. And I guess as it comes to a pricing model, look, we're talking about this internally quite frequently. We know there's some feedback, say, hey, it's expensive, you guys should look at this. It's a tough conversation, but there's one game, you guys can provide your feedback to these comments. But if there's one game that we are always being compared to, we do it to ourselves, other people do it to us, everyone does it to us, and that's World of Tanks. They're a very successful game. Obviously, huge game, right? Very, very easy. Well, easier to grasp. I remember when I first grasped it, it still seemed a little convoluted, but once you get a hold of it, you know, you got one gun, etc. It's you know, it's simpler to grasp, and they're very successful. And they do a lot of stuff very well. I can definitely look up to them and say, look what they did. We should look at that. That's fair. And I look at their pricing model, and there's no doubt that we took a lot of inspiration from them as someone we looked up to. I look at them and I say, okay, a garage slot, you know, 300 gold, 300 MC. First off, you get the same amount of gold per, you know, for price point that you do in Mech Warrior, and you know that is priced the same. Premium accounts are priced the same. I look at their tanks, and you know, their tier 8 premium tanks are $50 US, and our most expensive, you know, 100-ton hero mechs are $30. So I say, well, you know, that's even less than their tier 8 tanks. But for the most part, across the board, I say, look, we're priced the same, or in a few instances, a little cheaper. And then on top of that, we're much more, I know some people, you do a lot of grinding, but at the same time, we're much more, I'm trying to say here, gracious with the C-bills or the in-game currency. You don't lose money on Mech Warrior 9 ever, no matter what. You get at least, what, 20, 30,000 on the worst round you can possibly imagine. No losses at all. So there's lots of C-bills coming in. And we don't require premium accounts for near as much as they do. And whereas if you try to, if anyone here's, you know, tried to grind out a tier 9 to tier 10 tank, they'll know that if you don't have a tier 8 premium or, you know, premium account in particular, it's just like way tougher than the experience in Mech Warrior 9. So if I look for examples, and our closest examples out there in the industry, I think it compares very well. And for a smaller, more moderate-sized game like us, it's a constant debate of like, well, you know, we have this core player base, and we're kind of the same as these other games. If we lower it, doesn't mean, you know, likely means that our revenue goes down. It's a tough question, but I just want you to consider, I guess, those thoughts as I compare it to that particular game. And you know, I'd like to make, you know, the barrier to entry less, for sure. Although, again, in certain areas, you can buy 20, 25, 30-ton mechs for, you know, just a couple bucks, just a few bucks, and those aren't the mechs maybe that you want to earn towards. But I guess I'd like to see some more examples. Maybe you guys can, you know, let those Nico know or something of like, hey, here's a solid example of, you know, your prices compared to, you know, this game's prices, and why, you know, it's, you know, you're too high, rather than just looking only at our game and saying, you know, they're too high, if that makes sense. So yeah, I know it's a sensitive subject, everybody. You guys have hard-earned dollars, and you know, we're trying to do the best we can with you know, spending your dollars on the development team and development of the game. And again, all that revenue goes into the game. There's no, you know, giant dividends and new bolts happening over here. You know, it's funding staff, funding employees, and all going towards the growth of the product. So hope I answered that question well enough. There's no shining like, sure, no problem, we'll change all that tomorrow. But that's a little more explanation as to kind of how we ended up where we are and why we think it's based on some logic.
Cool. Thank you, Russ, for answering that question. We are going to take a quick 5-minute break, guys. Phil will take us out. But first, real quick, I do want to let everybody know we're getting a ton of repeat questions. So if your question is not answered, that's more than likely the reason why. So as I said before, there'll be several mediums where this town hall meeting will be posted: Twitch, YouTube, podcast, etc. So if you missed the questions that you're asking, you'll be able to go back and hear them. But Phil, take it away for our break.
All right, guys, we're going to be taking a 5-minute break. Go ahead, fill up your drinks, grab a beer, whatever you're doing, coffee. And, of course, we'll be right back. And, yeah, we'll continue on. Again, we got 6 pages of questions here, and I think we're on page, like, 3 right now. So, again, if you've asked it, it's probably on there. Or if not, again, we'll make sure your question gets answered. So, all right, guys, we'll be right back in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Stick around.
Yeah.
out of here, stalker.
Alrighty, guys, and we are back. Hopefully, everyone's having a great night. We are doing a town hall meeting with Russ Bullock, the president of Piranha Games, and basically we're asking him your guys' questions out there. If you have a question, go ahead and post it in the chat. If it is a legit question and not a troll question, we will place it down, and we are literally asking exactly what you say. So, anyways, welcome back, Russ and Darren. We're just going to jump right into the next topics. Anyways, again, appreciate you doing this. I think the community appreciates it. And Darren, you want to go and kick off the first one?
Indeed, and thank you again, Russ, for being here, as well as all of you out in the audience. This next question is from Pancake Man from Aces. His question is, will PGI take the same approach to multiple games like Hi-Rez Studios did? If one game proves more successful than the other, will the other be discontinued? There were several questions basically referring to Hi-Rez, so we'll lump them all into this one from Pancake Man.
Well, I'm going to have to guess a little bit about a game that's, not my own. But first off, I would probably word that a little bit differently. I know Todd at Hi-Rez a little bit. I know how excited they were about Tribes, how proud they were of the product that they made. And if you remember, it had some really nice reviews when it came out and stuff. And I don't think they stopped development on Tribes because their new game was more successful. I think it's almost certainly more a matter of Tribes wasn't able to make enough money to support itself. I mean, they probably had the same notion that we do, that look, if it's viable, they're going to absolutely continue to make it. But I'm assuming, and I have to guess here, I could be incorrect, I think it became unviable. I think it just wasn't creating enough money to even support a very small development team. So I could be wrong. Todd, if you're listening, probably not. They can correct us, but certainly there must have become a point where they made a decision and said, well, these staff that we have, they're high quality people, they do really good work, and we need to, apply them to a product that's successful for us. And so obviously it feels like Smite is doing very good. Congratulations to them. It's not an easy thing. So I don't know. I'm a little bit of conjecture there on my part, but as it becomes for us, it's back to, each game's viability. If you guys want to support MechWarrior Online for the next 6 years, then we're going to continue to work on it. And that doesn't matter if the second project is less successful than MechWarrior Online, the same, or a runaway hit. MechWarrior it'll exist on its own merits. So no, we're guessing at what Hi-Res's motivations were and exactly what the process was like over there, but that's how we're going to approach it.
All right. So the next question, and I don't know who this is from. All we have is the question itself. So apologies. NGNG TV, how could MWO community get involved with the progress of MWO for developers? So basically, I guess they're asking is how can the community be involved, or is it involved in the development process for MWO?
I think I'm going to be really quick on that one because I think I answered that before. I think we're going to finish off 2014 here with the maps I mentioned, the new game mode I mentioned, community warfare, planetary combat, etc. In 2015, we're going to definitely, that's a fulfillment of those features. So we're going to come to you and say, okay, what's next? And as far as getting involved, we talked a little bit about how maps might be able to go that way. And other ways, it's more voting processes for content, features, things like that.
Okay.
So we're still answering questions about the lifespan production of MWO. Just to give you guys an idea of what's coming up, we still have a few questions about IGP. We have some questions about, the clans, clan mechs, community warfare, and post-community warfare and stuff. So a lot of questions coming up. Please stick around. The next question, and this should be actually a quick one, Russ, maybe even a yes or no, comes from Danger Zone 922, and he says, when you guys reach 2020, which is the end of your license for MechWarrior BattleTech, will you guys try to extend the license again?
Well, I don't see why we wouldn't. I mean, that's a long ways out. I'm not sure we can really look that way, but I have a hard time believing that if we are still making MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior products come 2020, that means we're still viable right to that point. We still haven't lost our interest or passion for it at all. I don't see why anything would change. So at that point, it would really come down to Microsoft, and if they felt like they wanted to take it over, if they wanted to continue to let us steward the property, if they felt like they, I guess, made enough money during the process, or we handled it well enough, and that'll be really in their hands at that point. So in that situation, I think we would try. I think it's obvious that we would continue. If it's still viable, we still like it, we're still making it, sure we would.
Okay, next question we have is from NecroDaddy549. Do you plan on having any more official tournaments soon? And how often? And because he basically said the last one was quite entertaining to watch.
Yes, I want to have one of those right away. And so that was something that we ran through marketing at IGP. And it's very, very complex to arrange that between the two companies. And, it was fun. It was good. I thought it went over pretty well for our first one, but that was difficult and why we didn't jump on that right away. At this point, with everything in our hands, I want to jump on that straight away. I think we're feeling like, as a company, we have to do some things first, and maybe we're wrong in thinking that way. Like, maybe you guys can correct us and say, no, please just have a tournament right now. And what I mean by that is we want to make some more improvements on just all the esports aspects of the game. So, for instance, the spectate mode. And our backend engineer the other day completed the code that would allow us to add 2 more additional spectator slots. And my understanding of the feature is, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is the purpose is that those spectators could be, like, say, for instance, Darren and Phil from NGNG, or some other managers of the tournament, or commentators. And those 2 spectators then would have control over the private window screen. So they're the ones setting all the criteria that people need to meet, and they're the ones that say, yeah, everyone's meeting the criteria, launch. So it's a better control process, and so the captains aren't really responsible for managing their teams as much. They still are, but it's, the spectators get to launch that. And then, of course, once you're in, a lot of improvements over that spectate tool when it comes to how you show the enemies and the enemies once they're dead, make sure their names disappear. And I think a lot of those bugs and improvements have been done. Some haven't. So it's kind of been a struggle for us to commit to saying, let's do a tournament, because we're also juggling resources to try and, get community warfare and these things done, but trying to find cracks and moments in time to get enough of those other improvements finished before we have our next tournament. But maybe you guys would all agree that maybe we should have another one soon, with where the status of those tools are now, with the understanding that those tools are a work in progress and they'll get better and better as we go along. But that's kind of where we're at now. One was sort of waiting to the IGP Piranha thing to clear up so that we could run the marketing and we could be a lot more efficient with that process, and also kind of was waiting for those tools to get a chance and the engineers find the time to improve them. So we'd be happy to hear your guys' opinion on whether we should wait until they're improved or move ahead of the tournament.
Alrighty, the next question is from, hopefully I'm getting it right, Ikarin. The question is, there was talk a while back about splitting the servers for Euro players. How could this be implemented? I'm European, but mostly play with North American players. I'd like the flexibility of switching between these two servers. For example, GW2, Guild Wars 2, I'm assuming, without needing 2 accounts. Is this a possibility? And if not, why?
Okay, so Euro server question, or for that matter, places like Australia and whatnot.
Yes.
Well, there's some good news here and some challenging news. In the IGP situation, we weren't in control of the hosting, so it really was, and there were some kind of bad problems there in the sense, and I'm speaking for IGP a little bit, which maybe is a little inappropriate, but they had a data center in Toronto they owned the hardware there, and they were pretty hardcore locked into that data center and had quite a bit of costs surrounding that. So, getting data centers also then in Europe and whatnot was becoming a challenge. Now that we've switched over to our new data center, and that stuff is in Piranha's hands, it's been top of mind for me just the last couple of weeks. We can quite easily now spin up a box, let's say in Europe, spin up a couple boxes in Europe, or maybe one in Oceanic Australia region. Australia might be the best example here, because a lot of our European players, depending where you are, even German players and whatnot, are getting pings that are, close to 100, 100, between 150 and 100, quite acceptable ping rates for MechWarrior Online. But for instance, Australian players, which there are a significant number of players there, they show up in our top 5 lists for most metrics for MechWarrior Online, but their pings are obviously significantly worse. So let's take an example. If the challenge then becomes, let's take Australia as an example. Hey, we put a server there in the Oceanic region so that their ping goes from 300 or even 400 or whatever it is to 100. Awesome, right? Now the problem becomes how many players are in the Oceanic region or Australia. First off, they're probably going to want a chance to decide whether they play in North America or there. Now we can achieve that easy enough. We can allow the player to choose the server. We can say, okay, I want to play North America. Even if I have a ping of 370, I want to play North American servers. We can allow that. The challenge then becomes, though, we have that server in Australia, and let's say a lot of the players do want to play in that local server because their ping's so significantly better and playable that they play there. But still, our matchmaker, this is a 12v12 game, right? It takes a certain amount of players to get that matchmaker to function properly. And it's a pretty sure thing that I don't know that we would have enough players in, say, the Australia region to support their own little ecosystem of launching matches, with each other, and to support that matchmaker functionality. So if we put that process back over to Europe, that's a better situation. We got a lot of German players, a lot of UK, France, other areas are popular with MechWarrior Online, and if we put servers there, maybe there would be enough to support that. But then again, the MechWarrior community is not. This is not the player base of World of Tanks, right? I mean, it's decent size, but very respectably sized, but still, the North American servers will feel that impact. They'll feel the impact of all the European players playing there in Europe. So this is a very difficult question now. So on the one hand, we've overcome the difficulty of setting up a server in a region. We can quite easily do that now. But then it becomes different problems of like, well, how do those little ecosystems function with each other? And if people are choosing to play in the North American server still, is there enough players in that region then to support that server? Or if too many players in that region play on the local server, how much impact does that have on the North American servers? And it's just one of those things we're not going to know until we try. So I think that we're willing to spend some money and pick a region as a test case, put some servers there, and see how it goes, and see if it's very viable and it's great, and if you build it, they will come, sort of thing. And now all of a sudden, our European players in Germany and other regions is 3 times higher because we had that many people deciding not to play because they didn't want to play on the higher pings of North American servers. So I think it's going to take some money to just explore and find out those answers. But we're now finding the position to do that. So yeah, I think we're getting Nico and some people to start that conversation up, and let's everyone's going to raise their hand and say my region, my region. It's really kind of a debate between our European players, which is certainly a larger chunk of players. It's a significant chunk of players. It's probably very close to half of our players. I mean, we have very similar European and North American spikes on our servers for the peak European time and peak North American hours. It's very similar player bases, yet Europeans are connecting to North America. So it makes sense to put servers in Europe. Maybe our European players, though, which are getting very respectable pings, might say, help the poor buggers out in Australia. Let's put a server there as a test case. We got to figure that out. So I think we're happy to take some of your feedback on that and what you think priority is, and some of maybe we'll get a post. Maybe one idea is to get a post up from Carl or someone on how that might work, what the options are, and kind of see what our player base thinks of what the best option is, and what they'd be interested in supporting.
Thank you for answering that. And real quick, I just want to point out to everybody, if you're posting messages that are too long and you're getting slapped down by Nightbot, don't worry about it. We are picking up the messages in the back end and adding them to the document if they are relevant and civil and so forth. So keep that in mind. And I think Phil has the next question.
All right, so Only Stolen asked, when Nico visited the FLWM, Free Worlds League, he stated there would be an IS mech for 1-to-1 coming out for every clan mech. When will this start?
FLWM. Does that mean again?
Free Worlds League. Merrick.
Maybe it's spelled wrong or something. The acronym seems backwards. Okay. Okay, I don't even know what to say to that, because I don't know if that is necessarily true. We've got the Vindicator mech. Priority, well, I'll restate it more like this way. I think it's absolutely true, but not quite yet. We want to see the number of clan mechs get a little higher, not all the way to matching numbers of the Innersphere mechs. There's just isn't as many of them to begin with, or at least popular ones, interesting ones. Well, clanners are going to hate me for saying that maybe, but we want to get out another, let's just call it 4 or 5 mechs. Let's call it 5. 5 mechs, clan mechs, as more of a priority to get those numbers up to a dozen plus, and then I think we're going to get much more even in our mech production. So that might be a little bit of adjusting priorities, or I'm not really sure when that statement was made or why it was made. So I'd have to talk to Nico and see if that was where he got that from, or if that was something he actually said. Yeah.
Just to pop in, so when I was talking to the Free Worlds League, they were asking specifically if we were continuing to release new mechs alongside the clan mech releases, and I said that we were continuing with the the mech of the month at that time.
All right. Hi, Nico. And speaking of Nico, Russ, has been quite a few people asking if you could address the recent forum moderation.
Which particular question?
Well, that can be either Russ or you, Nico. Just the recent moderation on the MWO forums. If it can just be addressed, explained, whatever.
Oh yeah, well we've got a whole thread about it up, and I'll link it down to the text chat. But we should probably continue with Russ's concerns here. But yeah, people can keep poking me with concerns or questions about moderation in that thread, so I'll pass it over.
Well, I can add a few thoughts. I mean, we do hire a community manager to handle things for us on those regards. He is in the trenches quite literally almost 24 hours a day, so he understands the communication and the issues a lot more so than I do. My opinion is always the same. I want to show a lot of patience, as much as patience as we can, and communicate with people. And I think people have seen aspects of this from me in the past where I've literally tried and tried and tried and tried to communicate to users and show patience and try to work through their concerns. But sometimes we just feel like those efforts are not being listened to, they're not being reciprocated. And if an individual says you're the worst humans in the world because this feature hasn't been released, and we release that feature that next week, and then he says, well, you're the worst humans in the world because this feature hasn't been released. And it just gets to a point where it doesn't do anybody any good to keep that relationship alive. We're better. Our customers, the vast majority of our customers, are better served with us focusing on them and communicating with them than trying to communicate with players that show no interest in trying to understand or get along with us. In fact, it feels like their agenda is the opposite no matter what the situation. So we'll just have to leave it at that, because they'll never see it our way, or we'll never be able to see eye to eye on certain things. So the good news is there's very few players like this, very few customers like this. We wish we could get through them and talk to them, but there just comes a limit. We just have to set certain boundaries. And I think our community management could have been better in the very beginning of the project. If I want to throw ourselves under the bus a little bit, I think we didn't, when those aspects were under IGP control, I think we could have been a lot better at setting boundaries that we all wanted to live by at the very beginning of the project. But we didn't do that as well as in hindsight as we wanted to. So I think it created too much of an opening for too much running room in the very beginning, and then it was very hard to dial back that running room and say, no, we don't want this. And I think that we see that to this day. It's there's a lot of internet culture out there, as you know, and this is a hot topic in the game industry in general right now, that there's just too much negativity and troll mentality throughout all of internet gaming, all gaming, and all online presences that I personally feel really strongly about. I think it's out of hand. I don't know why people behave that way and online, because I know whenever these people get and they meet us in person and they come to an event or something, it is nothing but smiles and everyone's a nice person. So people are different people on the internet oftentimes. Anyhow, I think that the most valid piece of information I can reiterate there is that I think in the early going of the project, we could have set our boundaries and expectations with our customers a lot better than we did. And so now we had to kind of reel back in some of that running room and establish, a relationship with our customers that I think is respectful and considerate of each other, and hopefully that they will feel listened to with our greater form of communication that's happening now. Reflecting back on some of the things I've mentioned tonight around the 4 pillars and their near completion as originally discussed, the faster pace of 2014 of hitting those deadlines as promised, community warfare, planetary combat right around the corner. I'd like to hit the reset button with all those customers and say, we could admit some mistakes if you could consider the validity of some of these other statements, and we'll go from there.
All right, Russ, we've reached 2 hours, so now do you want to keep going?
I think that's up to our listenership. If they would like to stick around for another 30 minutes to an hour, then I'm happy to do so.
All right, well, we got plenty of questions, so I'm going to assume by the numbers that they want to stick around. Phil, you want to take us into another question?
Yep, let me go ahead and dive in. We have literally a ton here.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. We've got Shredhead99 asks, can we see more and better graphics optimization in the coming months? I guess that's more of a request/question.
Well, I guess it kind of, I'm not sure. Well, graphics optimization. So there's better graphics, and then there's graphics optimization, which kind of feel like opposite ends of the spectrum. So, yeah, that's a tough thing. When we first started MechWarrior Online, we set our minimum specs basically as high as we thought we could get away with that would work with the CryEngine, and that low spec machine now obviously is, I wouldn't want to play with it, right? But you can play with it. And now, at this point in the game, I think a really respectable machine is playing the game on very high settings with, 60 frames per second. But I still get lots of comments to me like, people that are running maybe a little bit older machines, just kind of barely adequate, closer to the minimum specs, and a lot of comments saying, when are you going to find time to optimize it so the game's going to run better? And then, of course, I also get the opposite end of the spectrum, people that have really hot-ass machines, and they're saying, when are you going to support all these other features of, DX11 and beyond? It's going to go even, even higher specs. It's really difficult to put new graphical features in the game without raising your minimum spec. You can try to put a lot of options in there. Oftentimes those will work, but sometimes you do just have to give up on some legacy aspect in order to go to a new set of graphics. So there's kind of the balance and the catch-22 there. I guess I'll say to our minimum spec players and people on the lower end of the spectrum, it is getting close to 2015. We set those specs 3 years ago. I don't think you should probably be waiting around for like when the game is going to start to run faster on existing hardware. I think right now our challenge is to try to not let the frame rate drop at all as we continue to improve and grow the product and add, new features into the game. Having said that, to finalize the answer is that is not a priority at the moment. We do have one full-time rendering engineer